Luis Eduardo has a really interesting biography, and I'm just saying a few sentences about his sort of educational history, because the rest he will tell you himself. This is a fairly biographical talk. But from preparing as a very young man to become a Catholic priest, he moved on to studying and completing degrees in Latin American literature, then later in interdisciplinary comparative religious studies, where he also holds a PhD. And then he actually ended up doing something else for a lot of time, namely conducting what I would think is probably most likely called cultural anthropological fieldwork. So he is one of the world leading experts and has a very long history in studying and working with ayahuasca. So one book of his I happen to have here. That is the Ayahuasca Reader. He also wrote Ayahuasca Visions, and many of you will have read these books, know about these books. And he's telling us now how he got to actually write them and where he is now in his life, having further gone on the ayahuasca journey.
All right. Okay.
Thank you, Luis Eduardo.
Thank you, Christina. Thank you very much. I mean, it's an honor and a pleasure to be here, because we had been online many times and now I'm here, so it's great. So I was inspired by John in the keynote speaker, and then I'm going to talk about some things that I have not talked before, Anyway, so I'm Amazonian. I'm from Florencia, Caquetá in Colombia. There is Caquetá from in Brazil is called the Juruá River. It's one of the main affluents of the Amazon River. My father was probably half Indian, my mother more white, but anyway, I am a mestizo, and I am a mestizo like most of the population. I mean, 87.58% of the population of Colombia are like me, just mestizo, nothing special. We have Afro-Brazilian, Afro-Colombian population of about 7%, and then an Amerindian population, very small, 4%. My area, Caquetá, was totally devastated by deforestation. Cattle, the main culprit, and then later on coca cultivation, guerrillas. All this area has been a disaster. One of the reasons why all my fieldwork was done outside Colombia, in Peru, Brazil, never in Colombia. It was absolutely too dangerous to be there. And this is the emblem of my city, Florencia, in the Amazon. Look at this, laurel from the Mediterranean, access to cut the forest, Bos Indicus from India, a palm from the Caribbean, perhaps, and so totally alienation, nothing to do with the Amazon. It was changed in 2009, I think. They put 2 Macaos instead of the, and then another kind of cow, but or bull, But anyway, so this was a little heliconians instead of lauret, little progress there. Anyway, so. When I was 12 years old, I was sent to a seminar in Bogota, in the capital, and then I studied philosophy. Well, I did noviciado. I was introduced, got my habit, and studied philosophy. And then I was sent to Spain, and I spent 2 years in northern Spain, studying philosophy and theology. I left. I will not tell the story how I didn't leave. In fact, I was expulsed. I was sent out, not because of women, but because I wanted to see the capital of sin, Paris. So I escaped to Paris, but that's another story. Okay, okay. And so anyway, I was supposed to go back to Colombia, but I decided to stay in Madrid. I studied filosofía y letras, and literature in Madrid. And the big change came in my life is when in 1971, I met this gentleman, Terence McKenna. So he was 26, 25, I think. I was 1 year younger. And he had just come from La Chorrera, I don't know if you have read any of his books, you know, but anyway, John mentioned the book, The Invisible Landscape, which was called then Shamanic Investigations. It was based on, well, it was a very interdisciplinary, incredible book, you know, at that age, you know, 25, and Dennis was 20, I think, based on the, you know, the time wave zero, based on I Ching. I was helping Terence to get the quantification of the I Ching, and we had the very first Yahe experience for both for him and me. So it was through this man, Kalman Sabo. I don't have a photograph. He was a Hungarian who had a friend called Hans Herbert Mosler. We met friends Hans. He had a good restaurant. And then Kalman, he knew Apolinar Yakanamihoy, a shaman from the Ingano, who I knew since I was a child, because I remember he went with his family to my grandmother's little shop to buy. And I was very interested, especially he had a hole in his nose. You know, I wanted to see, you could see the other side. Yeah. And Apolinar had moved from the Sibundoy Valley through Mocoa to Yurayaco, where at the time, when in 1971, it was forest. Terence and I tried to get there, but it was impossible. It was raining. It was impossible to. Without the guide, we would get lost in the forest. But anyway, what I never told is the Yahe, you know, the Indians, blah, blah. But I never told anyone, you know, and never in public, that my very crucial experience was not Yahe, although it was very interesting, it was cannabis. I never, you know, and the thing is that Terence gave me this cannabis. I didn't know anything about this, you know. I thought the cannabis was perhaps interesting. Marijuana, it will certainly be bad, you know. So I didn't know the difference. And anyway, so he gave me this. And I was lucky. I had an experience, and he wrote down in his diary the following. Yesterday was my brother's birthday, and post November 1st, just 30 days, he was reckoning time. So I don't know, I don't remember why. This was a day that I anticipated my exhibit peculiar properties. I was not disappointed. Luis Eduardo, joined in our customary even smoke, the Santa Maria cannabis, whose reputation is considerable. Within a few minutes, he was seized with a medium intensity chemical psychosis, which persisted in density for approximately 2 hours, and thereafter gradually diminished. This morning found our friend shaken and deeply impressed by his experience, but otherwise returned to normal. Subsequent questioning revealed that his previous smoking experience was practically nil, nothing. How, in spite of the fact that it is a tired cliche among the well-informed that cannabis can trigger moderate psychosis in those unfamiliar with its effects or those with latent psychological difficulties, last night's experience seemed much more like a sort of shamanic trance state or election phenomenon than like a simple outbreak of unconscious content. Throughout the experience, even at its most intense, our friend was able to keep his mind clear and to coherently describe his experience. This experience, though it exhibited all the phenomenology which one associated with the psychedelic experience, generally went much beyond that in one important dimension. Our friend felt and was physically dominated by something which he described as a magnetic force. This force, which seemed to ebb and flow in time with mathematical regularity, I was asking him to take the time, manifested itself as, first of all, a classical example of automatic writing. Though this phenomenon may be a small change among those whose mysticism is rooted in menopause, I don't know why, and theosophy, it was totally new experience to all of us present. Effects other than these, transference, hallucinations, spatial distortion, etc., were anticipated and integrated with relatively ease, but the perception seizure of motor activity centers by an agency outside the ego seems to place the experience closer to the phenomenology of shamanic trance than to chemical psychos, though the morphological differences are only a matter of degree. Where we innocent, we might chalk this off as a brush with a chemical psychosis. However, in view of the theories we have elaborated, this experience, though no more rationally apprehensible, argue that we should be alert to further unusual experiences and possible advances of our knowledge. So here you have a little bit Terence's mind. And it was 1971. In 1973, I went to Berkeley And then, of course, I was reading all this literature that was very, very recent. Hallucinogens, Shamanism, Michael Harnick just came out. Also, Peter Force, Flesh of the Gods. The Wizard of the Upper Amazon just came in North Atlantic Books. And then Terence gave me this book, Amazonian Cosmos, by Rachel Dolmatov, Gerardo Reisman, a Colombian-Austrian self-taught archaeologist and anthropologist. He was, in fact, he founded the whole thing in Colombia. And this book was written with one informant only. And it was a great inspiration. And he was pointing out the importance of capi, ayahuasca, yaje, among the Tucano. I wrote to Rachel Dolmatov, and amazingly, he wrote back to me, and he wrote this letter to me. Oh, well, this is only a paragraph. You express the hope that science is beginning to unite its links. I don't know what I'm talking about. I'm sorry not to be able to share this optimism. In many academic circles, the theme of other potential forms of consciousness or other realities is not always considered a legitimate field for scientific investigation. And to a certain extent, this precaution is justified because these themes lend themselves to a great deal of speculation that lacks all seriousness. You will excuse me if I give you some sincere advice. I think that you should dedicate yourself for some years to a very rich scientific discipline to acquire a foundation that will allow you later to concern yourself with the theme of your interest without falling into the confusion that unfortunately are so frequent in this field. Great. So, okay, I'm referring to studies of biology, botany, biochemistry, pharmacology, or a similar field. Although such a study may be long and difficult, I think it will offer you indispensable base to be able to understand those aspects of cultural human conduct that are so interesting. So I follow his advice. I went to Oslo. I fell in love with a Norwegian woman. I went to Oslo, and I spent 7 years there. And I was teaching Latin American literature at the university and taking courses, mathematics and chemistry, a little bit of astronomy, until my colleagues said, what are you doing? I mean, you're a Spanish Latin American teacher, literature teacher. Okay, so all right. I took 1 year of linguistics, and then I wrote the thesis about Garcia Marquez and so on. But when the position was open, it was not given to me, it was given to a Norwegian, and I was really furious. Then I'm getting out of here. I try to find a job, all right. And then I went to Finland. Okay, this is I wanted to have this because of John as well. With Terence, we continue the correspondence. I have something like about 100 letters from him, which I'm going to publish some of these in a book by Graham St. John's, which putting together an anthology about Terence. And one of the letters was very interesting. In fact, this was the first letter he sent to me after we were together in Colombia. He wrote, I finished Whitehead, Process and Reality. It is really a wonderful book and points the way clearly towards a synthesis of the intuition of religion and the laws of science. It is the only mature modern philosophy that I have found. By mature, I mean that it does not damage to the obvious nature of the given in a way, for instance, the Sartre concept of the mute universe, which gives no sign, seems to be to do damage to our intuition of being as we find ourselves in it. But mostly I have been catching up in my science reading all that I can on DNA and some molecular biology and on current thinking in astrophysics and cosmology. These fields used to seem to me forbidden areas, accessible only to that class of superminds of which I was not a member. Now, however, I find that all this is readily understandable, given a little attention. And in another paragraph, he said, you mentioned a neurologist friend with whom you had discussed his book, and that I should be I should be recently drawn to the field of neurology through the reading of an excellent book, Facing Reality by Sir John Eccles. It is subtitled Philosophical Adventures of the Brain Scientist. And it's brilliant, and it's a brilliant effort to stem the reductionist tide that creates a brain science which does not epiphenomenologize, I don't know how to, the fact of thought and the world of ideas. And Eccles is no mere writer, but one of the finest medical minds in the world. Okay, so you have a little idea about, Terence mind. Okay, so I moved from Oslo to Helsinki. I went to the Swedish School of Economics. This is in Swedish language. So I spoke Norwegian, and I could understand Swedish, and I learned Swedish later. And I spent 32 years there as a Spanish teacher, not a literature, blah, blah, no, as a Spanish teacher. It was a humble job, but it allowed me to do field work. And in between, I was 4.5 years in Florianopolis as a professor in anthropology. And I was given a Guggenheim Fellowship, which I spent a year traveling in the Amazon and doing field work. So the thing is that I went to the Swedish School of Economics, and I later found out the Rafael Carsten, which I thought he was Swedish, he was a Swedish Finnish. He had done the very first research on Natem, which is yaje or ayahuasca, and Monteshuar in Ecuador in the 20s and 30s. So by chance, I got his job, who had it in the 1930s. So he wrote The Headhunters of the Western Amazon, and this studies in the religion of South American Indians east of the Andes was published posthumous. And in fact, was the English teacher in 2 rooms from I who had been edited this book. So here there was the very first description of the rituals of yaje. In 1979, when I went to Finland, suddenly I got a job, and I was paid during the summertime. In Oslo, I was not paid during, so I was paid by the hour. So I thought I have to know my own continent. So I traveled to South America. In fact, I was almost, without knowing, following the path of Che Guevara nearly, through his famous motorcycle trip. And I went to Colombia to see my parents. I spent only a few days in Florencia, and I went to see Apolinar in Yurayaco. By that time, you could take a bus, nearly to his home. And I asked Don Apolinar, Don Apolinar, I would like to take yaje with you. And he said, no, it was suddenly somebody comes and he said, no. Then his son, who was a drunken shaman, I was talking to him, and I noticed, I was with my brother, noticed this sort of Stopharia cubensis growing all over the place. So I thought, okay, well, we came all the way here, at least let's take the mushrooms. 7 years before, Terence and I, we were looking for the mushrooms, and we didn't find them. Thanks good, because there was enough for me, cannabis and yaje. To have mushrooms on top of that, they would be too much for me. But the funny thing is that the mushrooms were growing at the airport. So I saw the mushrooms when leaving, So they were there all the time, Anyway, so I took the mushrooms, and of course, it was a huge trip, and then, but still I was thinking yaje. So I crossed this bridge. You don't see it's huge, very long bridge, and I have high anxiety. Took the mushroom, and then when I was crossing the bridge, I saw something that was coming. I thought a huge serpent is coming, but I thought, of course, it's the mushroom, And then look at my brother who was behind. His eyes were popping out. He was a serpent that came under the bridge and trying to get out. So with this in my mind, I went to see Apolinar again, and please, Don Apolinar, we want yaje. And finally he said, okay, yes, all right. So I had to run again to town to buy some batteries and candles and a little bottle of aguardiente, which I drank it in one gulp. And then I had my second yaje experience, which was absolutely extraordinary. I became a serpent, and that's what I thought, and so on, transformation. And I will talk about this kind of epistemology. So I discovered Amerindian epistemology, completely different, which I can say that now, which is not the subject-object, but it is the intersubjective, I will go to that later. Remember that in my trip, it was night. It was full of fireflies and stars. It was just extraordinary. I remember coming into the hut and telling Apolinar, you know so much. He said, it's not me, it's Yahé. I will come to that, later on. So, okay, so it was Yahé. So Yahé is the combination of Banisteriopsis gapi, and there are several varieties. These are two, Tucunaca and Capuri, and Diplopterus cabrerana. It was called Banisteriopsis rusbiana before. So these are two vines of the same family, Malpighiaceae, different from ayahuasca, which is the combination of Capi, Banisteriopsis capi, and Psychotrophides rubiaceae, a coffee family. Okay, so, and perhaps for it will be new, Yahé is a small area in between Ecuador and Colombia. Ayahuasca is much more spread all over Brazil and Peru and Bolivia. Okay, by the way, I took several photos, and one of the photos was of Roberto, is Apolinar's son, his wife Natividad, and this little girl here is now Huayra, who is a very important leader in the community, fighting for the rights. And, in the main newspaper in Bogota, I saw an article, our land is our wealth. We have everything there, but they want forcibly to build roads, extract oil, introduce cattle, remove our trees, even when we have no harm, not harm anybody. We only take care, we protect and love what we have inherited as a present from the earth. Okay, and this is something that's happening in Colombia. Colombia and Brazil are the two countries where there are most indigenous leaders being assassinated or harmed, so. And okay, I thought to make a film about Apolinar, and he died just a few months after. So I got the Bolex and a tape recorder, no sync sound, and just 1 hour, 45 minutes of 16mm film. But he died, then I went to see Terence in California, in Sebastopol, and then he said, you should go to Peru. He had been to Iquitos, and then he gave me several names. One of the names was Emilio Andrade Gomez. He never met him. But anyway, I met Don Emilio, and he became my teacher. I made a film about him, spent the summer with him, made a film that you can find it on YouTube. You type my name, Luis Eduardo Luna, and Don Emilio and his little doctors. You will see there is 27 minutes. Probably the first film on ayahuasca ever. And I did it using what the Jorge Prelorans methodology, very briefly. He said, you have to find a subject, record in the evening when it's quiet, record with your finger in the pause, let him talk. As soon as he tells stories that you press the button. When he's talking about inner things, important things, that's very, very important. Then you transcribe the next day immediately. Transcribe and start to work with like this. And this is the way I did the film. But I gathered so much material that it was enough for a doctoral dissertation, which I did later. But anyway, the most important concept, the Don Emilio and other ayahuasqueros, is the plants are teachers, plant teachers, doctores. He said ayahuasca is a doctor, tobacco is a doctor, Toe is a doctor, Bobinsana, Caliandra pentandra is a doctor, etc. So it was for me the discovery of this concept of plant teachers. And Don Emilio introduced me to Jose Corral, another ayahuasquero. With him, I learned. I went every summer. I'm just putting together, every summer I went to Iquitos again and again. I discovered animism. Don Jose Corral was preparing ayahuasca and the bubbles, coming from the pot. He said, "These are people. So everything is alive. Mind is everywhere." So that was the idea. And we're talking about what is the real, shaman and all this. This shamanism already is, mixed with Catholicism. You see, the gestures are the gestures of a priest and so on. I knew them well, And this is just another parenthesis. One of the plant teachers is Icurupita guianensis, the cannonball tree. But this not give you visions. This give you dreams. And I think that this is a chapter which is forgotten in the ethnobotany. All those onerogenic plants, you know, and dreams are extremely important. For instance, David Koparawa, who calls us people of the merchandise and the earth eaters, so it's a reverse anthropology there. He writes, the white people, they do not dream as far as we do. They sleep a lot, but only dream of themselves. They thought remain blocked, and they slumber like tapirs or turtles. This is why they are unable to understand our words. So during the old field work, I was taking, including when I was making the film, I was taking ayahuasca. I went through all the things. I kept the diet like it was required. And I was, I think it was Christine who sent me this pointed out this book, you know, being changed by cross-cultural encounters. I was not an English or American anthropologist going there. I was changed by my own culture because that's part of me. You know, I'm a mestizo. So I went back in a way to part of me, you know, and that's what I'm going to point out at the end, you know, mestizo. What does it mean, mestizo? It's not being genetically, you know, it is being both culture, you know, that's a real mestizo. Otherwise you are, you know, it doesn't matter. So extraordinary experiences forcing one to deal with the possibility that reality is culturally constructed, and instead of one reality or a finite set of cultural defined realities, there are multiple realities, or at least multiple ways of experiencing the world, depending upon time, place, and circumstances. Okay, I did my fieldwork. I got my PhD in Stockholm University. I published the concept of plants as teachers, which was the first time that this concept was put out. And then my supervisor was Oke Hultkrantz, who was a specialist in North American shamanism, who had written about peyote, and a specialist especially in Shoshone shamanism. I continued doing field work. I went to the Sibundoy Valley, where I found exactly the same idea. I went to the Kamsa, indigenous, a little group, a family, and then Don Miguel Chindoy was having a mestizo apprentice, and he was the one who told me, this is El Jardín de la Ciencia, this garden, the science garden. So the same idea. Plant teachers, Don Bolinar say, it's not me, it's Yahe, etc. So it's the same idea. So this is the mestizo who probably, now this was 30 years ago, 40 years ago, so now probably a shaman today, you know, I don't know. And the same idea was found by other anthropologists. Jean-Pierre Chomel, in Voix Savoir Pouvoir, he wrote that for the Jaguar Indians, the plants are l'unique chemin de la connaissance, the only path of knowledge. Okay, I was interested in the diet, not because I thought that I was going to be a shaman. You know, I wanted just phenomenologically, what happens there, you know? So I kept the diet in with the Machigenga, then with the Chipibo, then also with the Mestizo several times. And I wanted to know what is this? And the importance of these plants is absolutely crucial. I mean, all over the Amazon, you know, the Tucano Indians, the boys are initiated, you know, when they get reach puberty, they are initiated into the community by taking the brew and seeing in their visions that what they say, what the elders say, it is really true. And in fact, during the ceremonies, the older man will be telling the story, a journey, and the kids are experiencing the journey. So they see that it's true. And okay, this is the Yahe Potem on the Tucano. And Rachel Dolmatov found out that all the iconography of the Tucano and Barasana, the Sana Indians, is all about the visions they have. In fact, you know, so this was the Shipibo. All this is inspired as well by the visions. There is Angelica Gefarsay, a German anthropologist. She is the one who pointed out that these are in a way music, not partiture, you know, but there is musicality, because in this culture, they think that everybody's covered, well, or at least the people are covered by these designs, and illness is somehow the distortion of the designs, and you need to sing back, you know, put the designs in order, sometimes with the help of a hummingbird that comes in with the wings, making music and restore. But anyway, so this is absolutely important. Among the Siona Indians, studied by Jean Landon, the the face painting is all related to the vision. They have many different kinds because for them, the Yahe trip is into specific places. That's something that happen with us because we don't have a common culture. But for them, they will say they Yahe three nights after each other, and they will go. Tonight we are going to the second river, the third heaven in the second river, and they will go there, see the spirits. They paint their faces with the spirits of that place, sing the songs of that place, etc. So it's very, very the culture is forming it very perfectly well. So, and the same idea you find in the Davico Panawa. I did not learn to think about things of the forest by setting my eyes on paper skins, paper skin books. I saw them for real by drinking my elders' breath of life with the yacoana powder they gave me. And yacoana is the Virola elongata that contains 5-methoxy-DMT, extremely powerful substance. And for them, taking this is to die, because for them, that's necessary to be able to die, really to get to understand, Okay, another thing that I did in 1985 through Dennis McKenna, he introduced me to Pablo Amaringo, who was doing these little landscapes. And then I noticed that he had a very good memory. In fact, Amazonian people have incredible eidetic memory, probably because when they go in the forest, they have to remember, where they're going. And you have a flora of 80,000 different trees. And, so they are able to, so I noticed that in his paintings, he was very accurate. And I asked him, do you remember the visions? Because he had been a shaman, a vegetalista, had stopped 7 years before. And he said, I remember that. I said, can you do it? And this is the very first vision that I took to Helsinki, and I asked him questions. And then we started the collaboration that lasted several years with all these ideas about plant teachers, spirits, and so on. I mean, this was a gold mine because, it's not the same thing having somebody who will tell you about the spirits as somebody who say they look like this, So these are, I'm not, I have a lot of material, so I cannot deal much with this. But anyway, so this is the work of Pablo Amaringo. And then we put together this book in 1991, published in 1991. But the thing is that I realized that not only it was in the Amazon, all over South America, and probably in North America, if we include tobacco, the plants are there. So this is Sabine culture, 1200 BC, here in the old temple. Here to the right, you see this figure. Okay, this is the old temple. And here is the shaman in transformation, shamanic transformation, holding the San Pedro cactus. And now they found recently a San Pedro cactus 4,000 years old in a place which indicates some kind of ritual. And in the Tiwanaku culture in Bolivia, you have this kind of paraphernalia, this kind of here, this kind of paraphernalia that archaeologists are saying they had some ritual objects, but then through the work of Manuel Torres and other Chilean archaeologists, they found that in 25% of the funeral bundles, they found this kind of snuffing kits with the seeds of an Aeranthera colubrina. So these are the snuff trails found all over, in fact, in South America. So really, we cannot understand Amerindian culture. And I think that I will include the North as well with the Datura, perhaps, and some areas, probably Amanita muscaria, and then tobacco. We cannot understand Amerindian cultures without reference to the sacred plants. Let's call it psychedelic or hallucinogenic, or I prefer sacred because there are many different effects. It's not simply the visionary. There are many other effects, including dreams, as I said. So tobacco extremely important all over, America, from Canada to the Tierra del Fuego in Chile. Extremely important. Coca, very, very important in both in the Andes, in the Amazon. And in fact, the very first book written in the Americas on a European language was about an adelantera peregrina by the Ramon Panet at the order of Christopher Columbus in 1494, arrived to what is now Santo Domingo in Venezuela, in Haiti, and ordered this Ramon Panet, Catalan friar, to stay there. He stayed there for 4 years until he came back. He learned the language, the Taino language, and wrote this fantastic ethnography, in fact, about the Taino and the use of cojoba. They were using tobacco and cojoba. And remember the joke, that is McKenna. I said, that Christopher Columbus took tobacco back to Europe here, He didn't take cojoba. What a mistake, because if he had taken cojoba, DMT, it will be a completely different culture here. Yeah. Okay, now what is the relationship of plants of this culture? I'll put the Western hat, So in the Bible, we know, the mistake, so there was, and then in Noah's Ark, there were no plants, there were only animals. Except one, okay, I deleted that slide, but in the Germanic culture, it's extremely important. The Yggdrasil was the main tree, and it was a shamanic tree where Odin gave an eye to be able to drink from the well of remembrance. And the Christianity, at least those Christians, chopped the trees systematically, and the Thor's tree, and this is something that happened. I lived 70 years in Norway, and St. Olaf is the great saint in Norway. Look what he has in his hands, So that's the tool. And the same happened in Estonia, where the German friars cut the sacred groves of the Estonians and so on. But also we find it in philosophy, because Socrates, this is probably quoted many times, he was invited to give a walk outside Athens, and then to Lysias, and he said, "Forgive me, my friend, I'm devoted to learning. Landscapes and trees have nothing to teach me. Only the people in the city can do that. But you, I think, have found a potion to charm me into living. For just as people lead hungry animals forward by shaking branches of fruit, before then, you can lead me all over Attica or anywhere else you like, simply by waving in front of me the leaves of a book containing a speech." That was very interesting for Socrates. But then when we think Aristotle, what he thought about plants are perceived as beings without awareness and mentality. Plants have nutritive souls, are passive, without self-direction, and unable to assess the environment around them. Feeding and reproduction are simply mechanical processes. So we got it both from the religion and from the philosophy, and the result is that we are plant blind, plant blindness, that's what happened. Most of the people, in the Western culture, plants are just green, but there's not much there. Now, studies, current studies are changing all this completely. I don't know if you know the work of Monica Galliano, who is a great scientist, publishing a lot of scientific papers, and she's there to write this book, Those Spoke the Plant. And the thing that she became very famous for her experiments with Mimosa pudica, showing that the Mimosa have memory. Okay, a Mimosa, if you drop it, it will close the leaves, and then repeated the experiment again until at some point there is habituation. Mimosa doesn't close, knows that there is no danger there, put it apart and do it again, and she already remembers, that there is no problem. So there is some kind of learning from Mimosa and memory, and after the training. And so there is not only innate, response to that, but there is also a learned response, somehow understand that they understand, or whatever you wanted to say, that there is no danger there. She also did fantastic experiments with plants, the Pavlov thing, with putting a condition, an element there. The dog will salivate only when if you put them together, the dog will salivate. She did the same thing with plants, with a pea, not with food, but with light, and not with a bell, but a fan. And exactly the same thing, the plant was able to detect somehow, and many other things, So And in fact, she was in our place just a few days ago. Monica was there, and she has been one of the pioneers in bioacoustics, showing that plants not only can detect sound, but they can emit sound, and you can hear it. You can hear it. So in a forest, the plants are, there is, a symphony there. What is the function? Nobody knows, but there is something there. So it's changing completely our idea about plants. Okay, now we go to another thing. 1492. 1492 was really a disaster because we had two civilizatory experiments on both sides of the Atlantic, completely separated from each other, and it ended up a turning point, as Felipe Fernandez Armesto said, a turning point that would bond in a calamitous way two great civilizatory experiments on both sides of the Atlantic, ending with a hostile takeover of one of them. And so what happened is that America lost 95 to 98% of the population. The demographic loss was incredible. In Mexico, it went from 25 million people in 1518 to 700,000 in 1623, I mean, more or less. And so this was a disaster, as well a disaster of, burning the Mesoamerican libraries, by the bishop. He was very happy to burn all those books that had nothing more than things from the devil. The same thing happened in the Andes with the quipus. There was another way of writing, and then the bishop, said, because in Leo books the Indians have used, and some continue to use, registers made of different threads that they call quipu, and with this they preserve the memory of their old superstitions, rites, ceremonies, and perverse custom. The bishop should diligently try to take away from the Indians completely all the records of quipus that facilitate the superstition. In other cases, of course, killing the shaman who had the memory of the tradition and so on. Now, some years ago came this book, The Human Planet, How We Created the Anthropocene. And I was astonished, that they proposed the hypothesis that what is the beginning of the Anthropocene? Normally, it is said that in 1950, when we had the great acceleration, booming human population and consumption of everything, and technofossils and all that, which is after the Second World War. But they pointed out 1610. Now, 1610, what happened in 1610? And they proposed that it was a drop in carbon dioxide because of the forest came back. Amerindians were, most of the Amerindians were horticulturalists. So they were cultivating. When the population died, the forest came back. And in fact, later on, I learned that the first one to propose that theory was a friend of mine, Franz Faust, who I met in 1980, 85, and then he wrote this book with another colleague, I don't remember, Cristóbal Queneco, Evidence for the Post-Conquest Demographic Collapse of the America in Historical Carbon Dioxide Levels. So he's the one who proposed the return of the forest as a consequence of the demographic catastrophe of Amerindian societies. In fact, when the British and the French went to North America, all this forest, and they thought that there was pristine forest. Not at all. So these were new forests because that area were all cultivated by the Indians, who, by the way, they didn't have monoculture, and they were completely different techniques of agriculture. They were able to, I mean, the Americas, goes like this, Eurasia like that. So you have many different ecological niches, and the Amerindians were extraordinary because they were able to find, cultivate potatoes in 4,000 meters over the sea and in terraces in the Andes, and experiment in water management in Mesoamerica, etc. They were absolutely extraordinary, and that's, we see it today. I mean, this is a market in Mexico with chiles of all sorts. If you go to Bolivia, or in Mexico as well, the different varieties of corn, there are hundreds of them. The same with potatoes, the same with manioc. There was a doctoral dissertation about manioc in the French Guiana. There are something like 400 varieties of manioc. I mean, so rubber, of course. I mean, and the thing is that in the Americas, they didn't domesticate animals. Well, they have only 3 domesticated animals. So the great knowledge of the Amerindians was the plant world, cultivation and all that. Not the animals. I mean, we have the guacolote, or the turkey in Mexico, the llamas in the Andes, and the guinea pigs in Ecuador, so on. But not the domesticated animals. 5 minutes only? No, I cannot make it. Okay, we'll see. So objectivity, that is our way of looking, the Western way of saying, subject, object. But this is not the shamanic, this is not the Amerindian. In fact, probably the animistic way is subject into subject. Relational epistemologies. So the best way to learn about something is through identification or transformation. And so it's a change from being object to being a subject. So animism, which is my tour has been from Western European, into animism. Animism, to a great extent, is the recognition that there is mind in life, there is subjectivity everywhere. So this is not a philosophy, it's not an ideology. Animism is not something in your head. Animism implies an intimate knowledge of the natural world, therefore greater understanding of living processes. And so this is a fantastic book by David Abram. The indigenous oral culture's nature itself is articulate. It speaks. The human voice is in an oral culture is always to some extent participatory with the voices of wolves, wind, waves, participant that is with the encompassing discourse of an animated earth. There is no element of the landscape that is definitely void of expressive resonance and power. Any movement may be a gesture, any sound may be a voice, a meaningful utterance. So in Western literature, especially philosophy, that's what they cut its ties to the sensory world and found itself floating in a self-referential, disembodied world of pure abstraction. That's something the philosopher have to think. So we have to go back to the senses, to the direct experience. I think that Whitehead will agree with this, So and how does it work? In my own work, it's the only way to experience mind in plants is to silence the human apparatus. They deal with concepts and just feel, observe, listen, be open to the pure present without self-reflection, just to be there. You don't need to know the name. What is the name of this? Just to be there. So, and my favorite plant at home is this fantastic, beautiful Brugmansia aurea that comes from the Sibundoy Valley in Colombia, that I have a very special relationship with that plant. And in shamanism, it's all about nature. It's all about the songs, of the birds, the learning from the birds, learning from all the animals. That is, shamanism is like, in a way, the diplomats, because they are all persons, they are all people, it's like the diplomat who is dealing with all this large population around them. So, okay. I have no time for that, so I will have to skip this, the Amazon, my Amazon, which is now we are understanding that the Amazon was not at all, it was heavily populated, have high culture. This ceramics, it belongs to high culture. And the incredible discovery, the Amazon is mostly sediment. So every place where you have rocks, you have petroglyphs, So, and they are everywhere. And then there have been extraordinary discoveries, like this Chiribiquete in the Caquetá, my area, when they found paintings, 13 kilometers of paintings, 13 kilometers of rocks with paintings. And in fact, it happens to be that the great specialist is here. The great specialist is a Colombian professor. I'm going to see him next week, Jose Iriarte, who has been working in the area. So I'm looking really forward to meeting, here. Okay, and so in the Amazon, they're finding all these, they are everywhere. So there were cities of different kinds, it was a network covering hundreds of kilometers, you know, and the large population. And now this is just couple of weeks ago, they found with this LIDAR scanner, finding pyramids, you know, in Bolivia, 22 meters pyramids in the Bolivian Amazon. There are probably dozens of them. Our idea of the Amazon is going to change completely. So as an Amazonian, for me, I will have to skip Amazon. I have to think of that, you know, because I'm mestizo. I'm partly Amazonian. That is my Amazonia. I have to identify with that, you know, and with animism, with the tremendous terra preta, I don't know, the best soils in the world are in the Amazon. They are anthropogenic soils created by the Indians, and so now my idea, my question is, what if these two ways of seeing the world could combine? It's not that I'm going to, as mestizo, I'm going to renounce to European, you know, science and all that, you know, and say, okay, I'm going to be animist, you know. I think that we need both. And so what if these two ways of seeing the world could merge? If we could be truly epistemological polyglots with the interest and capacity of studying the living and non-living world with the precision of scientific language, while at the same time be able to somehow perceive the spirit or anima of all what exists. So this is the same idea that Jeremy Nervi has done, and I didn't, for reasons, you know, I didn't go back to the Amazon, but I'm in the Atlantic coastal forest, where my wife and I, we have an area which is probably only 7% left, an area which is supposed to be even more biologically diverse than the Amazon, but only a little bit left, you know, because of the urbanization and cattle and coffee and sugar and all that. So I started this crazy idea that I wanted to have a place, and so it took me a long time, and now it's 22 years old. I have this place in southern Brazil, with a beautiful garden that is going to be the subject of my talk next week here. Then I'm going to talk only about the garden. Okay, so thank you very much.
Thank you so much. This is wonderful. I know. And actually, we would have liked to hear it, but then in a way, on the other hand, you know, I was a bit torn. But you gave me a wonderful platform to say, read more Adorno. The mimosa and the concept of mimesis are actually very closely related when he says art is a form of knowledge, and the way in which actually mimesis allows us to engage with things in a way that doesn't appropriate them. So a non-appropriative assimilation, that is something art can do, and that philosophy and language are not particularly good at. And of course, neither are science. But apart from my motto, read more Adorno, this is fantastic. I'd so love to be there. Are there any questions? That's not a problem. Joseph, do you have questions? Okay, so I don't have an order now. Maybe start with you. You haven't asked that many yet. Thank you, Adam. Where's Alex? Okay.
Sure. Thanks, Christy. What my question, Luis, is what if they can't? What if? Because I share your hope that from your last slide, kind of epistemological polyglots. And we've heard a lot the last few days about pluralism, you know, William James's pluralism, and, but I think that's the one thing, the risk is that is the one thing that science will never do, is allow other truths. It risks being a monoculture, one that's open to different ways of, but it's science in my mind, tell me a straw man, but has a view that there is truth and falsehood, that there is some stuff, knowledge that's scientific and knowledge that is not scientific. And some of that, I think do you think there's a risk of that they won't meet, and then?
If you give psychedelics to scientists, you know?
Yeah.
That is the word, because that, then you're a scam, it's completely distorted and say, oh, I thought that I knew, but there is something else, So I think that is a very important role. So I'm, of course, agree with, for therapy and all this, although in a way, for me, it's the Western way, therapy is, for me, is like a little bit narcissistic, it's just about me going inside and my traumas, etc. I think that there's more therapy in the connection with outside, with the forest, with the place, with the animals, with other people, but it's more connection. And I think that in this connection, a lot of problems can be solved, like depression or this, which very much is caused by not connecting, so, yeah.
Any of the hands that were earlier raised relating to this theme?
Science.
Yeah, what's that? I try to create structure.
Yeah.
You just reminded me of some research projects that climatologists have done, some of them with NASA, some of them with Canadian universities, where they learned from Native Alaskan elders about sea ice, because they need ground truthing to compare against the satellite images of the sea ice. And as we've heard, I mean, it's like, what is it? It's urban lore that there's, I don't know, 100 names for different kinds of snow. I don't know how many there actually, but there are differences, whatever they are. Anyway, so the idea is that, and the question about can scientists change? The idea was, let's improve our science by talking to these native people. And I mean, it's rational. It does help to readjust the models and all that stuff. But aside from the political question, the way they actually achieved that was not by a couple of visits, but they actually lived there for a few months, actually, to then establish some level of trust, some common language, like Galison, the trading zone thing. And then, but it took talking through the cosmology and metaphysics on both sides to then find common points that they could use as terms they both agreed on. And then we go to the snow. But it was a very long process, which these things often are not. But if you plan for a long process and live there and party with those people as well as, exchange views, then there's some possibility of it changing. But it's just a lot of communication and devotion and living in the same place with the same people, I think. Then it's possible, it seems.
I agree.
Was there a question?
I was just responding to that question and that answer. And sorry,
we have one question from the online audience, so I asked Joseph to ask that now.
You wanted to ask me?
So first, JPR would like to thank you for an amazing talk, and then they ask, if plant medicines are plant teachers, do you think there is a synthetic equivalent? What is your opinion on synthetic psychedelics more generally?
Okay. Well, yes. Pity I don't have a slide. We think of let's say ayahuasca, harmaline, tetrahydroharmine, DMT, the four components. But in a ayahuasca brew, you have 26 or 27 components there. That is, and the indigenous people, they have a taxonomy which is much more sophisticated. For a botanist it's the same, but instead of a capi, for then it will be cielo ayahuasca, trueno ayahuasca, this kind of, so it depends where you cut it, where cultivate it, where you harvest, what moon, where is, if it is near a place or not. So we are losing all that the same way that we are losing food, I mean, we have all these varieties of potatoes and corn and etc. And we ended up in the supermarket with, so terrible. I mean, so impoverished we are, I mean, we are supposed to be, this great civilization. We are really impoverished in the food and therefore in microbiome, as well. The richest microbiome in the world is the Yanomami nearly uncontacted Indians, who have huge, because they are eating for 200 different species. So I think that all that is, for me, is impoverishing. You have to go to the plants if possible. And for that, you need to cultivate it. You have to change the world. So.
Thank you very much. And then there's another question from Osiris, which is congratulations for a wonderful talk. My question is, would you explain a little bit more about dreams as a source of knowledge?
Well, I mean, that's what the Indians say. And I think that is something that we have completely neglected. We put an alarm, take a coffee, the dreams are gone completely. We don't cultivate it. The Amazonian do, the Australian Aboriginal, of course, extremely important. The dream world is very important. And I think that's, again, how we are impoverished. We sleep, we have two, day and night, and we think that dreams are nothing to teach us. They are just like mechanisms that, but there is a lot there to be learned. And I'm interested in lucid dreams, of course, which in fact, in my case, they started because I followed some instructions putting brugmansia, in the forehead. And, apparently, I have been talking this with Labert. Apparently, there is a possibility that the atropine alkaloids can go through the skin and activate somehow, the lucid dreaming. Now, what are the lucid dreams, if they are located in what are out of body, or it is, for me, I think it's more memory, you enter into your own, because sometimes you see the mirror image, or is the same place, but the objects are not in the right place. So I think that has something to do with memory. But anyway, there's another thing. So, yeah.
And I've actually just got one additional question following on from the previous one about synthetic psychedelics. It's from Samantha Black, who adds, are therapeutic extracts useful, meaning extracting the active ingredient, and does this limit the action or understanding of the plants themselves?
Yeah, but if you are extracting the active, what is the active ingredient? I mean, that is the thing, So if you're extracting the active, you define which one is the active ingredient. So you have to have the whole plant, if possible.
To this question of dreams, I mean, it's not quite true. It's there's this phenomenon that people who enter into a psychoanalytic process actually dream, and they remember their dreams, and then they report them, and they discuss them, as long as they are within the process of the psychoanalytic encounter, and then they move out of this again. So there is an interesting distorted relationship we have with dreams. Foucault wrote about that also, but this question of what is the place of dreams, which how can it be that in a particular setting, as soon as you enter into this relationship with the psychoanalyst, you actually start dreaming, and you step out of it and you stop. Yeah, this is really a lot going on here that one could unpack, but maybe we don't do this now. There are many more questions. So I have now. There's a question seriously about time. As far as I'm concerned, and probably Luis Eduardo, we could stand here all night and keep talking. I do, however, not think that in the end we think maybe we should have gone to the bootlegger bar afterwards. So I would like to find a way in which we can navigate this. Can I just assess how many questions we have now? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 6 people wanting to ask questions. If you can keep them somewhat brief, and then maybe I start with Peter.
Okay.
And of course, if there are more questions from the online audience, we will take them.
Thank you, Luis Eduardo. Very fascinating as always. My question relates to animism and Whitehead, linking this to John's talk. So you were talking about this sort of dichotomy between an animistic understanding where subject and object are somewhat fused, and then you are sort of saying that this is sort of incoherent with a sort of Western scientific point of view. But I'm wondering, do you think, like Terence, as you were quoting Terence McKenna there, your friend, do you think that maybe the ambit of science can be expanded to include animism through some kind of Whiteheadian philosophy?
Okay, well, I'm sorry. I'm not, I'm very poor in Whitehead. I mean, I tried to read Process and Reality too early. I didn't understand a thing. I have been trying various ways now. Fasasi gave me some good tips to read the first chapter and the last chapter, and then later on, so okay, but I'm, I know that it's, I have to, but not yet. I mean, the thing is that because of Christine and because of this group, now I wrote to Christine, you brought me back to philosophy because I was alone there, and suddenly I have people who I can talk to, so it's great, so in fact, I'm beginning again, you know, my education in philosophy. Yeah.
Animism. So maybe can I just say it quickly? Yeah, thank you. Really fascinating talk, actually. I just want, my question is about animism as well. You said animism implies knowledge of the natural world, of the plants. And so if you could say just a bit about what sort of knowledge you mean, because I mean, the sort of knowledge that scientists have in the Western world, you know, they're really not animists, you know, so,
No.
so do you mean intuitive knowledge, experiential knowledge?
I think so. I mean, because a botanist or a scientist will see a plant, they will divide it, you know, okay, these are these parts, and then you go down into cells and this and that. You are, you know, taking the ultimate components, you know, possible, you know, mechanism. The animist way is just to have them as persons, as intelligent beings, as one more person like you, and just try without too many, it's just to be in the presence, and things happen, you know. I mean, you know, I mean, yeah. Even sometimes they communicate in dreams. In the Amazon, they say that they teach you plants, songs, you know, and so on. So it's another way of communication, completely different, you know. Which, in its time, you need patience, you need silence, you need, you know, a good environment, you need, you know, in order to be able to you know, that's why I curated a garden, you know, there, you know. I mean, for me, this pandemic has been fantastic for me, because 2 years just seeing the plant, putting the plants, seeing them grow, you know, when they flower, the birds they bring, the bats, you know, all this, you know. I've been learning more about the plants now, you know, now I know much more than 2 years ago, you know. So, and I have been, that's what I feel, you know. And I think that there is a concept, bath healing, or is it Japanese who wrote something about that? Just being in the forest, you know, just without ideas, just being in the forest, just brings you down, brings you, you know, made peace, or you know, and then you feel this connection and all that. So I think that is more intuitive part, or I don't know, whatever, you know, than here.
Personal knowledge, the way I could know my friend or my family, and then maybe certain plants.
Yeah.
I don't know them that well, but you know,
Yeah.
I know them really well.
Yeah, the way you will feel your child, you know. You don't need words, you don't need, you know, it's just, you know him, you know, and there is a communication there that you do not need words, you know. I think in a way, you know, I mean, everyone who has a pet, no, I mean, I have a dog, you know, I mean, there is a communication, there is no doubt the intelligence, I mean, you know, and all animals, you know, in fact, you know, there is a famous book, Are We Intelligent Enough to Know How Intelligent Animals Are? So, yeah.
You've wonderfully described your outer journey to animism, but to my surprise, you have said very little about your inner journey to animism. I'm not asking for a complete another lecture, but perhaps you could give an example of being with a plant, having some experience with ayahuasca or yahe or whatever, something that brings to life your experience that you can share with us.
Yeah. Oof. Well, I mean, for the first, you remind me, there was in a conference, a professor from Iceland, very serious, is ayahuasca addictive? And so I was thinking, and I said, not at all. I have taken it over 1,000 times. Yeah, because right. He didn't know how to react, you know. But it's true. You know, I've been so many places as I commented yesterday. So my boring, you know, because I go to the same place, and I've seen this before, and navigating there, you know.
Describe one of your places to us.
Okay. But then one place. Okay, once I was in a place which was the technology was there. You know, the metaphor. There was some kind of scanner. I went through some kind of a scanner. They scanned me. There was some machines there, and then I went to a place where the people there, they were moving hyperdimensionally. So they were here, and they're there, and they're there, and they're there. So they are moving, you know. But they were moving, you know, and there was the way to move, you know. And the thing is that later on, when I thought of this experience, I was thinking, my visual memory was they were little animals, like some sort of, but my feeling was they were people. So I understood that, and in fact, in Animism, in Eduardo Viveiro de Castro, a Brazilian anthropologist, he said that for the Amerindians, the other, the animal or the plant, they see themselves as we do ourselves, So they see themselves as human. The jaguar, for the jaguar, we are the jaguar, and he is the human. So they call it perspectivism. So I've been thinking, what if everything that exists is like us? We have some kind of perception, so kind of understanding different because the senses are different. But somehow the inner sense of being is there, perhaps. Is there. I don't know. And then perhaps we can communicate somehow. And the shamans, they have these techniques of communication, but. So, okay.
I have a hunch Mark's question is an.
Thank you, Lewis, for your powerful and humbling lessons, which I'm sure we will all be digesting for a long time. And in the interest of trying to be an epistemic polyglot to salve Rianne's semantic malnutrition, and without wanting to continue the fraught history of cultural chauvinism that, that South American history is so plagued with. And I do understand that your field of cultural study is present day shamanism, not historic use. It's possible to unlock this. I'm going to ask a very difficult question, and I just want you to know that I'm approaching this with humility. I'm just really interested in whether you have an understanding or a take on this. But in May, the Journal for Archaeological Science revealed. First, if you could tell me if you've heard about this, a discovery of a group of children near Peru's Ampato volcano with harmaline alkaloid in their fingernails and hair. And people interpreted this, they were child sacrifice victims, and that they were given ayahuasca before they were sacrificed. So my first question is, do you think this happened in the historical Amazon, in the Inca Empire? And secondly, is the narration of child sacrifice an unfair othering technique by Europeans especially? Thank you very much.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it is sure. I mean, you say ayahuasca, it is not sure they found harmine, Okay, so we don't know. There are other plants that contain harmine, so we don't know. And of course, unfortunately, I'm not idealizing Amerindian cultures. There was human sacrifice, yes, in the Andes, there has been, and the Aztecs, my goodness, they were horrible. I mean, so yeah.
I just want to say that the very notion of sacrifice said European opposition to the notion of offering. So the notion of sacrifice is that you're cleaning your soul or whatever. You're giving yourself to clean. In Amerindian societies, it's about the offering to the land, go back to the earth. So that's already a kind of a colonial way in which sacrifice.
Yeah.
There's a deep history of them using psilocybin and other energetics before.
Yeah, but the funny thing is that the Spanish, when they're old, they have human sacrifices. What is Inquisition and human sacrifices? I mean, there were huge festivities, with flags and music and all that, taking these poor people to be burned. I mean, that's human sacrifice. So, yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Wonderful. Just about this question of shamanic communication, and I talked to Jeremy Narby, who put me onto Graham Townsley's, I think that's his name, who wrote about the sort of language twisting, and this process of sort of improvised poetry that the shaman through which the shamans communicate. and I heard that the Icaros aren't sort of songs or hymns in the way we think of them, that there is more of this improvisational element.
But I mean, they say that Icaros, by the way, say Icaros, not Icaros.
Icaros.
At the moment that, you know, even shamans in the Peruvian Amazon, they're saying Icaros. They say, oh, okay, they have been in contact with Griegos, you know. This is Icaros, you know, Icaro, not Icaro, you know, no, Icaro, yeah. Because there is a verb Icarar, which is mean blowing to give energy, or singing something to give energy, or so on. Yeah, well, they say that this is the way the many things communicate. Your plants and animals, you know, they can, in fact, everything, you know, because they have the Icaro of the beach, you know, the Icaro of the forest, the Icaro of this and that. And so very often the process of shamanic learning is learning songs, you know.
And are they the same each time? Would it be like, you know, you sort of like learning to?
No, there will be many different songs, you know. And in fact, one of the things that happen, you know, if another shaman sings your song, I mean, it's like appropriating, this is my song, you know. Or, well, you can say, okay, fine, but it's my song, you know, or not my song, really, I got it, you know, I got it, you know, from this or there, you know. So, yeah. Yeah.
But it's the same each time. So every time you sing the song of the.
Yes.
Yeah,
okay, there will be, yes, it will be the Icaro of.
Not improvised.
Yeah. No, it will be Icaro of this animal or this place. Or,
right.
Yeah.
Right. It's not improvised.
No, not improvised.
Not improvised, no. Okay.
Even counting for the 10 minutes we started late. We are now 15 minutes over time. So I'd like us to really close at past. I have Sabina with one hand raised. Is there any other question that I'm not good in sort of this memorizing who's put their hands up. This is just not something I can do. But maybe do we make this the last question and then I close this session?
Okay.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks for an amazing talk. I kind of wanted to ask about brugmansia because so I have my own personal interest in the hallucinogenic nightshade family, partly because like there's such a rich history of European animism, like with some of those plants, belladonna, henbane.
Yes.
Even datura, and like I've tried to find out information myself to try and kind of practice the histories of my own culture, but there's such minimal information because it's like we got rid of our own indigenous like writings as well. And yeah, I'm just really interested in the kind of experience of that family of plants. It seems to be quite unique sort of phenomenology, and just want to hear a bit more about your experience if you'd like to share.
Okay, I tried it 3 times, the brugmansia, twice in combination with ayahuasca, and once by itself with somebody who told me he was a toero. Toe is the name given to brugmansia soveolens in the Peruvian Amazon. Wow, that's very, very difficult. Very, very difficult. Okay, because it has something to do with your memory. I mean, okay, for the first, physically, you get dry, completely dry. I mean, you know, so you drink water, it's like the sand inside you, you know, so it's extremely uncomfortable. Then your eyes, you are focusing on in the infinite, you know, there is no way to focus on, you know, it's just like that, you know, your pupils are open. Then very difficult to say anything. Because you begin a sentence, say one word, and you forgot what you just said, you know, or even walking, you know, remember going to the toilet, and so then it was like disconnected completely, and I didn't know when this was going to happen. Or you close your eyes, you open, you are talking to somebody, you close your eyes, the person is not there anymore, you know. So it's very, very tricky, and in fact. In the Peruvian Amazon, they say that the toeros are like the top, much more advanced than ayahuasqueros, but there are very few. There is a technique that is, in a way, is dying out. Yeah. They say that really, if you want to be a toero, you have to be ready to take it and be lost in the forest for 10, 14 days, you know, and go through. I mean, that's not easy, you know. So.
Yeah, this is why
So,
These plants because it's
well, good luck with that.
I think the numbers speak for themselves. 1 in comparison to 1,000. I think we can draw conclusions. Thank you so much. Let's have a round of applause.